Okay, very nice to be here. Really great to be amongst all of you, educators and professionals in the education industry. I'm very humbled to be here. Obrigado, as you all say. And so I want to sort of start off by saying that as an advisor to AltSchool right now, as an international advisor to AltSchool, our goal is to enable every child to reach their potential. And we really mean that word, every. We act from the conviction that education quality, can come from scale and not from scarcity. And that the approach really starts with our own kids. I mean, this is AltSchool's co-founder, Max, with his daughter Sabine, who's 5 years old, and she's been in AltSchool and she will continue to be at AltSchool along with her brothers for the... Can you hear me now? Hello? Good? Yes. All right. So I'll start. We're good? All right. So I'll start off in saying that, our goal at AltSchool is to enable every child to reach their full potential. And we really mean that word, every. We act from the conviction that education quality can really come from scale and not from scarcity. And that the approach that we should take should really also start with our own kids. So the photo here is that of Max Ventilla, the co-founder and CEO of AltSchool, and his daughter Sabine, who's at AltSchool. And we believe that over the next, for the future, for the conceivable future, we really need to, reinvent education from the ground up, with technology being an enabler. So the methodologies and technologies that we've adopted in AltSchool, which I'll be talking about in this presentation, will transcend onto other schools. I mean, that's why we started AltSchool to begin with, not to affect a certain area of education, but all of education. This is the key sort of technical challenge that we're trying to solve in the education space, is how do you achieve a 1-to-1 student-teacher ratio outcome, but in a 20-to-1 or 30-to-1 environment. And what's nice is that, broadly speaking, in education, the space is very much aligned that, this is sort of the holy grail. If you could achieve a 1-to-1 student-teacher ratio outcome, then students will progress twice as fast from one year to another. And so, how do you allow the student to learn all the things they need to know in a traditional environment, but that, puts it in a way where they have agency? And that agency is what's driving their experience, their educational experience. There is obviously challenges. And what makes this challenge particularly challenging for schools, for traditional schools, is what we call sort of the local maximum of traditional education. So you've got this curve, right? You got quality on one axis and amount of personalization on the other axis. And it obviously shows that the more you increase personalization, the better the quality of education. But it reaches this peak, right? Which, we could look at as that's the best that traditional education will get without breaking as you personalize for each child, because of specifically the context of current traditional education. I mean, you can imagine that if you were to try and personalize education for each child in the classroom, it'll be, distracting on so many other levels, from an administrative standpoint, from a, teacher quality standpoint. I mean, let's face it, it's a lot more work, right? How many, there's only 8 hours in a day. So quality will be affected if you actually try and personalize for each child. So the problem that we're actually facing is, how do we get over this valley that exists here, that you can see in the slide, so that, you can almost argue, even from an ethical standpoint, schools are very resistant to changing this model because kids are only going to be 5 years old or 6 years old or 7-year-old only once. So from a parent standpoint, it's like, why should I sacrifice my child, in order to just enhance personalization and education for the broader good? So, the system is almost in this sort of very difficult situation. It's kind of like a hard rock in a corner. So, what we're trying to achieve here is build an education model that leaps ahead of this valley that you see in the slides. In fact, we're way overdue. I mean, at this point, the quality that is required for kids to adapt in an ever-changing world is already higher than that kind of maximum that you see, that peak in the curve. And so what we've said at AltSchool is that, we can't have a bunch of incremental increases in education when it comes to personalization. We need to take what we call a hard technology route. So let me kind of step back a little bit and talk about traditional sort of what we call edtech. Edtech, so far has actually adopted what we call an easy tech approach. And what you see here is, education companies or education technology companies that are adopting more sort of the Snapchat, Google, Facebook model. Okay. Sure. And so what you see here is edtech companies taking the sort of traditional, easy tech route, which is to scale something, to the education ecosystem fairly quickly, so that you hope that as you sort of reach scale, you can become more innovative and become, create more value. Not a lot of edtech companies, in fact, I would argue, aside from probably AltSchool, very little edtech companies have actually adopted the hard technology route, which is akin more to sort of what a Tesla would do, or a typical biotech company or a clean tech company would take, which is creating a meaningful amount of R&D first, and then once you've built, a proper sort of solution, you scale. And so, from our standpoint, it's really important that we learn first before we start implementing. I mean, as it was mentioned during the introduction, we don't all come from an education background, but for us to actually understand what educators, students, parents, and the entire ecosystem in general needs, we needed to build our own schools. And so we believe that, the time to do this is now. I mean, we would be, everyone talks about AI and the future role of robots and artificial intelligence, but, it would be a very scary world in 20 years or 30 years if, at this point, computers are doing the kind of work that, normal humans would. And so, we need to sort of build an education technology system that actually allows our students to adapt in a world that's constantly changing. And so what we've done is that we've built 8 lab schools, both in San Francisco and in the New York area. And by lab schools, I mean environments where, students and professors or teachers, as well as administrators and parents, all collaborate in helping us develop a new model for technology in education. And so what we've come up with over the last 3.5 years, and mind you, we are still very much in sort of an R&D phase right now, is we've created 2 products. The first product is called Playlist. So you can almost think of it as a digital workflow for students and parents, as well as teachers, that all have access to. And that's kind of like the workflow for the student. Every child in our school walks in, they have access to Playlist, and they see this sort of agenda that's been set by the teacher on a tablet or on a laptop. But all the work that they do is in the physical world. So only 15% of the time is actually spent on a digital device. Most of the work is actually done in a sort of a classroom, as you can see here. And this is the smallest of our 8 lab schools. But as the playlist system becomes more and more utilized, what the system starts to do is actually create almost like a digital representation of the child's learning curve. So you can almost imagine like an electronic medical record version, but designed for the child's education. And the beauty of the model is that as you understand more and more this child's sort of digital ID, so to speak, it feeds back into playlist. And playlist then becomes more customized for each child in the classroom. So, being a sort of, taking that hard tech route requires a lot of R&D, requires a lot of investment in sort of getting the right like-minded teachers and parents who are willing to contribute to the platform. Because education doesn't end in the classroom. It goes beyond the classroom and in the household as well. Sorry, forgot to show you this. So on the left-hand side, we have playlist, or a screenshot of playlist, where you can kind of see these different cards that are being served up for the student to choose from. So let's say Billy is having a trouble with statistics. And we know that, or at least the teacher knows, that Billy loves baseball. So one of the cards that the teacher can initially serve up is a baseball example around statistics. And as more and more of these cards get served up, it goes into what I was talking about earlier, which is sort of the digital sort of portrait of the child. And again, the feedback loop continues accordingly. So right now, we're in this sort of middle phase, or like what we call development phase. Initially in our research phase, I mean, we had to partner with all kinds of organizations. Nothing can be built in-house. We have a team of 50 engineers working in San Francisco, but we partner with companies like Intel and Microsoft and other edtech startups with whom we're trying to kind of roll out playlist to our own network of 400 students and their parents and teachers. At this point, we're in sort of core development phase where in many ways, we feel that we can even start extending the platform to partner schools. Because, obviously every school has their own curriculum, their own content, their own culture. So the nice thing is that we're now in this sort of beginning phase to start piloting the solution, our technology, with partner schools. And we have a wide variety of schools, like from a Montessori school to a religious day school, to an IB school. And that's kind of like this 10-year vision that we have, that until we finish our R&D process in about a couple of years or so, that's when we can say, let's scale it out to other private schools and public schools, obviously, as well. The amazing thing, though, is because there's been very little R&D in education. I mean, here we're talking about numbers within the United States. I mean, less than 0.2% is dedicated to research and development and education in the whole of the United States. And so, we feel like EdTech is great. It's a phenomenal, phenomena. But at the same time, what are we building and who are we building it for? Especially if we want to, achieve a mass personalization. So the model, as I mentioned, is agnostic. You can imagine then that if we have a technology that is catered towards only a specific let's say country or a specific type of school or curriculum, then we can't achieve the type of network effects that we're looking for in order to optimize for personalized learning. And so you can almost think of AltSchool's technology as an operating system. We all carry our phones, right? These are probably the most personal devices we carry. And yet it's the same operating system. I mean, I know Android here is very big, so I mean, everyone here is probably using an Android or an iOS device, but they're personalized to each of us, right? In terms of the apps that we download, in terms of the wallpaper we choose, or whatever content we're using it for. And that's kind of what AltSchool's vision is, is to kind of create this operating system for schools to then adapt and choose what they need based on their curriculum, based on their specific standards, or for that matter, their culture. I'll say something that's kind of a little bit more broad around technology and how it disrupts certain sectors. But typically when they say disruption, or the term disruption in technology, it usually means a form of unbundling, right? I mean, take for example in the banking industry, where financial technology has unbundled literally every kind of banking service you can imagine. There's an app for payment, there's an app for savings, there's an app for getting a loan, there's an app for investments. So that's clear. And the same thing has happened with education technology within this space. Teachers and administrators are having trouble sort of figuring out, what exactly are the optimal solutions for them. And there is no centralized platform that allows them to pick and choose what is the best content for their students. And so you can imagine a world where, with AltSchool's technology being fully baked, you can start looking at, well, if this particular content worked to achieve that particular objective in this specific environment, can it work in mine? Even though they could be completely different, So you could have this network effect of schools that are sharing best practices through this operating system. And that's kind of like the 10-year vision that we have here. So we don't think that there's any sort of bigger mission than this, which is to help or enable every child to reach their potential. But we strongly believe that by making the best education, the most accessible education is really the way to go. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing your questions. I know that my next colleague is going to be actually showing you a more sort of on-the-ground experience of what we're both been trying to achieve. Thank you very much.